Hello and welcome to yet another episode of In Pursuit of. Today, my guest is Shruti Nair, who leads Ashoka India. Welcome, Shruti. And what exactly are you in pursuit of?
Thank you, Aparna. I'm in pursuit of a world where everyone realizes their power to bring change for the good of all.
So, Shruti, I think everybody knows the Ashoka Fellowship, but we'd love to hear from you what your organization really does.
Ashoka started in the year 1980, and our founder Bill Drayton really brought the world social entrepreneurship to the world. And I think the first fellow, in fact, was elected in India. Her name was Gloria de Souza. And since then, the last 40 years, we have been finding, selecting, and supporting social entrepreneurs who are doing system changing work. We are completely domain agnostic, so our Ashoka Fellows are doing powerful work in solving really complex problems in the society. Incidentally, Bill's growing up years were also in India, and he was deeply influenced by Vinoba Bhave, who's a Gandhian. And I don't know if you know, Bhudan movement was, where a large landlords or people who have large chunks of land were donating their pieces of land to the landless, right? So I think the shift that brought in the mindset of people and in donating land was just
So tremendous.
Bill was really fascinated with that. He was very influenced with this idea of how do you bring a system changing idea to the hands of an entrepreneur, and he decided that what if we build a community? What if we give them an identity? Because there was no such term as social entrepreneurship that existed back then. And then we started building this community of finding and really supporting social entrepreneurs and building this community for them. And since then, it's been 40 years. We are 4,000 social entrepreneurs strong across 90 countries now. One of the things, Aparna, that we also saw was, what if that just a handful of social entrepreneurs are not enough to solve the problems that we have in this world, right? So with that sort of learning, we started working on building this community called the Ashoka Young Changemakers, where we are finding really young people in their teen years solving problems in their community. So that's what we're doing at Ashoka. We fundamentally believe that the power of an individual is huge. The power of an individual who realizes their power to bring in change is tremendous, right? So how do you sort of ensure that each one of us realizes that power and puts it into action?
How many entrepreneurs have you had till date, and how do you measure impact? Because I'm sure there are people who fall through, and who don't end up, continuing with their NGO or with their organizations.
We measure impact on multiple levels for the work we do, Aparna. So if we had to just flashback several years, right, about 40 years, the field of social entrepreneurship didn't exist, right? So for us, the very fact that we have moved from a time where, there was no social entrepreneurship as a concept to now when there are academic institutions who are running courses on social entrepreneurship. Any work that happens at a mindset level shift has an impact of its own. One of the realizations that we've also had is that in the impact study that we've done over the years is that 83% of our Ashoka fellows have changed systems and policies within 5 years of becoming a part of the network. So I think that is a very sort of tangible way to measure the mindset shift or the system change that we've been able to create as an institution, right? Another very important piece of work that we are trying to do is how do we sort of get the skill set and the mindset of a social entrepreneur in each one of us, right? Particularly our young people growing up. I think there are two very key sort of indicators that we'll look at for that. So what proportion of our young people self-identify as change makers? Do they really believe in their ability to bring change? And the second sort of key indicator for us is what proportion of the society or the communities believe that they are failing or succeeding depending on the change maker ability of the groups that they have.
Absolutely. And how do you measure that also? I mean, it's hard to, somebody who's actually not doing anything can also say that I think I can create change. How do you know? Is it just by talking to people and understanding it, their level of commitment over the years?
It's just like any impact research that we do, right? How do you sort of go into communities and try and understand what is the work that has happened, does the individual or a group really have the ability to bring change in those communities? So we're working on developing a framework around measuring your ability to bring change both at an individual and at a community level.
Very interesting. I'm trying to understand that ability to create change is also linked to funding at a large level. So somebody's intent might be there 100%, 500%, as I like to put it, but there may be no resources. Does that come into your measurement?
I think, of course, funding is important, right? And I think what we have realized specifically with our Ashoka Young Changemakers, who are really young folks in the 12 to 20 age group, right? And funding is not their first sort of decision-making criteria in terms of starting an initiative where they're trying to solve a problem that they see around them. For them, if they empathize with a problem and if they really want to solve it, they have been able to mobilize teams around them and sort of leverage those teams to bring change. Right? Let me give you an example. For instance, one of our Ashoka Young Changemakers, her name is Garvita Gulati. She's based out of Bangalore. And she went out for a meal with her parents. And when she went to this restaurant, she noticed that the waiters were pouring glasses full of water, and people were not really consuming that water, and a lot of that water was getting wasted, right? So what she decided to do was, she went back home and she spoke to her parents and reading about drought in the newspapers, and then I see all of this water getting wasted. So her parents said, "Oh, so what would you do about it?" So she said that, "Why can't we just fill the glasses half full?" So she brought all her school friends along and she built her own team, and they went from one restaurant to another, convincing people. Over a period of time, it was adopted not just by a lot of restaurants, but even, bodies like the National Hotels and Restaurants Authority of India. And her campaign is called the Glass Half Full campaign.
Wonderful. How old is this girl?
When she started off, she was 13.
Wow.
She is. Similarly, there are a few other stories, right? So I think a lot of these change-making ideas, I think funding, of course, is important, but I think there is a lot of work that you can do, and you can start off with just mobilizing communities and resources. Is our learning from the work that we see with
wonderful thought, actually.
change-makers. Yeah,
that's such a wonderful thought, because I think a lot of times entrepreneurs and even people otherwise get stuck with the idea of funding. If we have no resources, how do we do this, right? And I think it's just about getting creative with how you can get people to believe in your aim, and and be a part of that change.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So now, how does your program work exactly? Ashoka India's program.
There are two big pieces of our work, but let me sort of divide it into 4 program buckets, just for the ease of understanding. So one big piece of work is finding social entrepreneurs who are doing system changing work. The other piece of work is engaging them in, one is a 3-year-long sort of support that we provide them, but even otherwise sort of engaging them in helping them scale their work, or, helping them collaborate with other Ashoka fellows, be it in India or elsewhere. So those are 2 big pieces of work with Ashoka fellows. The third piece of work is finding Ashoka Young Changemakers, right? And how do you sort of show the society that change, the ability to bring change is a skill set that can be built just like playing cricket or playing a violin or any of that, right? So how do you get them to practice really early on? So show a new way of growing up to the society with the Ashoka Young Changemaker community. And the last piece of work is how do you sort of work with other partners to also then take this Everyone a Changemaker framework to the society. So let me give you an example. In India, we're working with Tinkle, which is part of the Amar Chitrakatha group, right? And they are taking the stories of Ashoka Young Changemakers and representing it in comic book formats for their young readers, right? So how do you sort of work with partners and take these stories, and show society that, academic achievement or grades might not be the only criteria for success, and it will not be. That will not be the framework for success for young people at all.
Tell me, what is a unique challenge that you have as an organization, which maybe other organizations in the social sector don't have?
As we sort of grow, we have 500 plus fellows in India now, and as we grow, it becomes a challenge to sort of continue the engagement at the same rate. Our focus is on how do you sort of ensure that everyone has the skill set and mindset of a social entrepreneur. How do you help partners, other sort of stakeholders see the urgency in this? Right, I think, and that's a very unique challenge, and that's also a challenge that comes with any sort of social change movements. Any sort of shift in mindset is it's time consuming.
Absolutely.
Right? It's slow, it's hard, it's also painstaking if you really understand the urgency of it, and others involved are not really seeing it, so it can get frustrating.
It's true when people talk about, and to think of it as urgent and not just as an armchair conversation,
right,
which happens in our drawing rooms, but
right,
to actually each person to be able to take action in their own house,
absolutely,
maybe in their own households. Yeah. Very nice. So, Shruti, what is your personal alignment with Ashoka India?
Thank you for that question. I think I always fall back on this Chinese proverb, right, which says, women hold up half the sky, right? And growing up as a young girl, I was told perhaps more about the things that you can't do or shouldn't do rather than the things that you can do. And when I see women who are sort of mobilizing communities to bring change, it's very powerful, right? When I see a young girl change maker, right, a female change maker, sort of really defy societal norms and step out and bring change in her community. It's hard for young girls to do it in the societal framework that we live in, but it's also very powerful, right? And I think the skills that they learn in the process will ensure that we have more women in leadership, we have more women in societal and sort of democratic and political processes, and we have more women in the workforce. I think that's the way it is headed. So I think that's my my sort of personal alignment and what sort of drives me to come back to this work every day. I'm really proud to share that 60% of our Ashoka Young Changemaker cohort are female, right? And that's a very conscious sort of a decision for us to ensure that young girls are at the helm of bringing change making to the society and are role models for the society.
So, Shruti, tell me, what is your vision for Ashoka India?
Ashoka is an organization, right? I think we've really been able to make social entrepreneurship a norm. And I think my vision is the same for Ashoka India for change making, and which would mean that perhaps Ashoka Young Changemakers may not exist because it will not be a rare species anymore, and everyone will be practicing change and not waiting for someone else to come and change it. My daughter is 8 years old, and I wish, as she grows up in a world where both her and her peers are solving problems that they see around them, they feel the agency and the urgency to do that themselves. So I think that's the vision. It starts with each one of us, and I think it will also end with each one of us.
How nice. So, that's so true that children nowadays are actually born into a time when they have to become active change makers. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult, I think. And it's so nice that, an organization is actually working towards that. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you so much for sharing so much about Ashoka India. And on that note, stay tuned to hear more from Shruti only on In Pursuit Of.